Evening, everyone. Welcome to today's session on root cause analysis. I'm Sqn Ldr Sargam. Before we begin, I would like to tell you all that this session is being recorded and will be available for you to view once this is over. I request all of you to remain on mute and keep your video switched off. And you can type in your questions in the chat box. We will have the presentation followed by a question and answer session. So Captain Amit Singh will take us through the presentation. He's been an aviator for the last 30 years. He's a fellow of the Royal Aeronautical Society, and he's a safety and training specialist. He's also the author of the blog mindFly. Over to you, Captain.
Thank you very much, and welcome aboard mindFly. This is a series of webinars we host every weekend. Basically, the idea is to inculcate a sense of belongingness in the aviation community so that we can come together and discuss issues. And if anybody has any issues to discuss, points to highlight, topics, in peculiar topics or experiences, they're most welcome to discuss. What we have seen in the past, and everybody would agree with me, that life is so busy and hectic that we are so engrossed or overwhelmed with work, the daily work, that we do not put any attention or emphasis on the creative aspects or the thinking part. So mindFly basically highlights the human factor issues which affect us in the daily life. I will go through a presentation today. So this presentation is on root cause analysis, and it says root causes, not just pilots. So it's about a 25 minutes presentation. After that, we can have a question answer session. And so you see on the opening slide, we have a fish with multiple causes written on it. This leads to the effect part. It translates in aviation. We'll see soon. Root causes, as you can relate with a tree, you can see something, the trunk and the foliage, but below the tree is the foundation. And the foundation, the roots split into multiple parts which hold the whole tree together. So if the foundation is good, the knowledge and the conceptual knowledge is good, then the tree is sturdy and it can grow and bear fruits. So the idea is to understand the concepts of aviation safety and human factors. And of course, we can discuss and develop the ideas. To go ahead with the presentation, you can see these multiple pipes. This is representing the way we work nowadays with cross connections, interlinking. Life is not so simple. So for example, we take a flight. Flight begins from the left, the green line turns left, right, and the aircraft is safely airborne. There may be times when people are not mindful, not in the place, not attentive, or maybe just unsafe. So at times, like in the Swiss cheese, things go straight through. When things go straight through, it might lead to an accident as well. Well, you must be wondering why the pipes. So as part of the design process, the designers or the management who make the SOPs can make a simple process, which is the straight part could be the normal, and to catch the errors, you make the turns, twist left and right. So it is not just a pilot's responsible. Everybody, beginning from people who have designed the aircraft to those who make the SOPs, So everyone has a role to play in this. But once we have an accident on our hand, what happens is there's an investigation. So investigation, if it is cursory, would like to know why did the pilot not turn left? So here the issue is, and what truly comes up in the media is, why did the pilot not turn left? So the highlighted portion is the pilot. So you catch the pilot and blame him, which is the primitive method. So punish the pilot because he's the person who's first available at the scene and at the end of the causation exercise. But like I mentioned, the tree, what you see is just a symptom. So you punish the pilot, so you are affecting the symptom and not the root cause. For the root cause, you have to dig, and you have to dig further into the earth to determine the root cause. So how much do we dig? So you have the light at the end of the tunnel, or maybe gold there. But if you stop digging short, catch the first person available, then it is going to happen again. The event will reoccur and you won't know what happened and why is it reoccurring, because you never reached the end of the tunnel to find the root cause. So you have to continue digging until you get everything in hand, then decide what all was responsible and the percentage. So the weightage of responsibility has to be determined once you have everything on your hand or on your plate. A classical error which used to happen in the earlier generation aircraft, where the altimeter was designed in the form of the vintage watch. Now you have digital watches, but the watch. So now in this particular example, the indicated altitude could be 20,900, or you could interpret it as 21,900. So in safety, this is called risk proxies, whereas the risk is not directly readable. You have to interpret the instrument to determine what it is and what is the risk which is available. So initially, when this confusion used to happen, of course, the pilot was blamed, and the reason was pilots were not paying more attention. Once you start paying more attention, then the flight length increases, or distractions come in, or fatigue sets in. So again, there were errors. So after a number of years, they decided to fix it. The designers said, yes, we have identified the problem. Now we'll fix it. So what they did was they made a digital representation, 20,900, which is very clear. So unless you go back to the drawing board and find out why this problem is occurring again and again, it cannot be solved. We have seen in the previous webinars, unstable approaches. So punishing a pilot or counseling him will not have that effect until you find out what was going in his mind. Why was the go-round not performed at an earlier stage? So the pilot needs to see the risk. At 1,000 feet, he's not able to visualize the risk, and the effect of the risk. But once he gets closer to the ground and he sees the runway ending, then he sees the risk and he panics. So it is the design and the management both need to come together and find out first, is the problem with us, the design of the aircraft, the design of the SOPs, and then later on move towards what actually happened and who was responsible. So this is the smart pilot who has been caught in the cause effect fishbone. You have the pilot in between. So obviously will be caught and punished. But if you follow Ishikawa, who was a Japanese designer, thinker from the engineering side, he made this cause and effect fishbone diagram, which is also called Ishikawa fishbone. Now he reduced the pilot size basically So now you see the options available. So there are multiple causes. That was the basic premise of Ishikawa fishbone. And the pilot becomes one of the cause, which is the small one. There are multiple causes. So he is not a big factor now because you have to analyze multiple factors. So one of the factors is man. Man could be the pilot or any number of persons in the chain. Could be a dispatcher, a loader. So you have to list out basically how many people were involved in this chain of errors. Then you have the machine, of course, the technology, the material, the method, and the measurement. So Ishikawa fishbone ended here. Later on, three more were introduced. Three elements were mission, management, and maintenance. So now if you see, there are a whole lot of factors which ultimately come together to cause that effect. And the pilot is one of the contributory factors. So now you have a good picture of what is happening in the accident scenario, and the investigator can now determine where things went wrong and who could have prevented. Who did what wrong and how much went wrong. So all these factors are used in this Ishikawa fishbone. There are a number of other ways to find out the root causes, like the 5 whys. You ask yourself, why did it happen? For 5 times, you will come to the or come close to the root cause. In ATSP uses another method, but this is the most common method used. Originated from the quality, the production quality, but is very effective in investigation also. So this is what was introduced later, and of course, the man is still the element, but a smaller element. The origin was in the 1960s in the Toyota production. Ishikawa introduced these factors: mind, which is the physical, or machine, which is equipment and technology; material, the raw material, it could be information; methods are the processes or the SOPs; measurement is inspection. So it is not that if you have a regulator, the regulator is not responsible. If you do yearly audits and you continue to have accidents, which means the auditing process needs to change. We have seen it in other industries, like in finance, also, that the auditors failed to pick up or look the other way when things were going wrong, things were going down. So the measurement is also a major factor. It was expanded later to mission, the environment, the management, leadership. The leadership is a key motivating factor. And of course, the maintenance. I'll start from here. The safety culture in the industry started from the Chernobyl nuclear disaster, wherein they had the best technology, best scientists, and the safety culture of the organization was one of the causes, or rather the big cause. The Challenger disaster, the explosion, in the report, the exhaustive report, politics, budget cuts, schedule pressure because they had to go, and managerial complacency were a few reasons why the explosion happened. Safety culture is basically the way things are done in an organization. It is about people's values, attitudes, and behavior. So first, you have to go to the people and ask if everything is okay. So there has to be a starting point in safety culture, which is in safety culture, you start with a survey. So survey is the base point wherein you go out to the people and say, where do the things stand? Because ultimately, you have to connect with people. In the safety culture ladder, you have 5 steps. The lowermost being pathological, which you could relate, is when people say, who cares as long we are not caught? People continue to do their activities, but if something goes wrong, they do not report. because they say that let's continue. If somebody catches us, then we'll see. Which means the culture is at the bottommost, which is the pathological culture. Thereafter, next is the reactive, where safety is important. Everybody says safety is important. And we do a lot every time an accident happens. That also we have seen. Accident happens, there are committees, there are inquiries, there are reports, and after 6 months or a year down the line, everything is forgotten. That's a reactive culture. Calculative and proactive are slightly better, that we have systems in place and safety leaders. Safety cultures stand around here. But we should be aiming for a generative safety culture wherein everybody is responsible. You responsible for your actions and for your safety and other safety. So in the hope of achieving a generative culture, you end up in a proactive culture. Just model, everybody has been talking about just culture, but in practice, it is not seen. Because once an occurrence happens, everybody wants to know what happened and who is responsible. So in a hurry to find out who is responsible, they find the first person. But the public, the traveling public, or the bureaucrats, they also need to know what just culture is. Because ultimately, you have to manage safety. Safety has to be managed, and a trust has to be built between the regulator, the operator, and the crew. So if an occurrence happens, of course, you want to know if it is an act of omission or a deliberate violation. So if you can't find the person, then safety management system improves the process. If you find it, then you further determine what happened, and based on the occurrence, you segregate it. Was it a willful negligence or an honest mistake? So just culture basically differentiates between that. But there are a number of countries where it goes to the next stage of punishable. You punish the person, or even further, the judicial system takes over. So that is basically criminalization of the aviation accidents and investigation, which is not the intention or the purpose of an investigation. So this is what we are not aiming for. We are aiming for a just culture wherein honest mistakes are pardonable and corrected later on, but not the deliberate or the gross negligence. A few examples of criminalization of aviation, wherein 3 examples where ATC officers in other parts of the world were put behind bars for near misses. This is a sub 2000 sports cruiser incident in March 2019. Article 237 of the Criminal Code was implemented, and the ATC officer responsible for the close call was put behind bars. The one Swiss 20 incidents, 2 aircrafts on different runways taking off. One rejected takeoff, the other one continued to the destination, but the ATC officer again was prosecuted. Third is the Ryanair 737 Air Portugal 319 incident, again a close call, and who was put behind bars? The ATC officer. Similarly, the cockpit crew has also been prosecuted in UK, with courts took the investigation report and used it, which is not the basic purpose. That's why at the end of every investigation, what you can see is the probable cause. They won't say this is the cause, it is the probable cause, because in the legal matters, there can be a different argument. So in the court, you can argue the same case differently, and the outcome can be totally different. That is why an investigation will only list the probable cause. After the criminalization, a number of organizations put out a joint resolution to prevent this. And few of them were the Flight Safety Foundation, the Royal Aeronautical Society, CANSO, and the National Academy of Space. So they are all working against criminalization of aviation accident reports. Coming back to safety culture, we have seen the first one is reporting culture. People should be free to report. There should not be any hesitation. Anonymous reporting system should be working efficiently, like you have the ASRS in the US. They have no hesitation. But there are some systems wherein the anonymous reporting is in the form of an email ID of a regulator. So that is the first impediment to safety and the reporting culture, wherein who would want to report to a regulator, and that to a person wherein the biases come in, and there could be sense of vindictiveness also, depending on the person. So it is the system which has to address it, not a person. Next, you have the informed culture, wherein people who manage and operate have knowledge about the human, technical, and organizational factors. Flexible culture, you're willing to learn and be flexible. If you see something different, or you're willing to change your SOPs. So that is a flexible culture wherein everybody is taking part and feel responsible. Learning culture must possess the willingness and the competence, the right conclusions from the safety. You have information coming in from various sources, from reactive, proactive. You have incidents reports, anonymous reports. Everything should come in and analyzed, and people should learn from it so as to prevent accidents. So just culture is an atmosphere of trust in which people are encouraged or even rewarded for providing essential safety-related information, but in which they are also clear about where the line is drawn of acceptable and unacceptable behavior. So in just culture, it is a no-blame culture, and no, people, if found to have violated the regulations or the procedures deliberately, will be blamed. It is not a no-blame culture, but there is an element of differentiation of what is acceptable and what is not acceptable. This is a very interesting diagram, a matrix. If you see closely, moves from the left, and you can move right and to the bottom. First is the description, what happened. And then based on which box you stop at, you can move down. So if we take any box, for example, some incident happened. So what came out was we can't follow the procedure and get the job done. Which means the SOP which is there is not practical. So what is the type of violation? The type of violation is situational violation. What should the management look at? Management should get very active. How were poor procedures signed off? So management, rather than blaming the crew, they're looking inwards. That if it is because of a procedure, how were the procedures signed off in the first place? So they have to do their own root cause analysis, so as not to repeat the same thing. Investigation from the supervision point of view must listen to the workforce, because people who are on line know what's happening. So they must make the SOP or be a part of the SOP making process. Not that people sitting in the management in ivory towers, they make the SOP and hand it down to the people who are at the grassroots level. And if it is not implementable, then you have incidents, exceedances, and then they come back to the drawing board. So it's a back and forth process. So if people who are on the line are made a part of the process of making SOPs, they feel responsible, and you get the correct, accurate information for that. So the workforce must report all such impossible situations which are not practical. Discipline-wise, blame everyone for the pilot that an incident happens, but everyone is responsible because ultimately the SOP was also responsible for this incident. And coach people to tell workers and listen managers and supervisors. So people should report and managers and supervisors should listen to them. So that's how you collectively come up with a new SOP which is more practical, and then you'll have reduced incidents, accidents. So the collective responsibility which works at the end. If you want to take another example, uh, it could be the last one. This is the way is reckless behavior. So the management says, how did we hire such a person? So it is not that you, but they have to look at the selection process. That how did he go through the selection process or the aptitude tests or psychological tests that he reached at this stage? The supervisor, how did we let him stay here? Didn't we know in advance? So there are always trends which safety picks up. How did it happen that nobody flagged it up? Workforce, leave company, dismissal, and again it is coaching to recognize and deal with such individuals. So it is not that you reach this situation, you have to prevent it at an earlier stage. So the basic idea of presenting this slide is that you have to first look inwards, find out what went wrong from our side rather than straight away blaming the person who's involved with the accident or incident. Another such matrix is with this behavior, wherein at the bottom you have the diminishing individual culpability, which leads to dismissal. Whereas on the other side, you have verbal warning, first warning letter, final warning letter. So there are different stages. So were the actions as intended? Yes. Were the results as intended? Sabotage or malevolent actions. So dismissal. But if you go towards the right, then they are not less and a lot of coaching is involved. So once both the stakeholders, the management and people are online are aware of such a process, then they know that the system is going to be fair. When you have fairness in the system, then your safety culture improves, your reporting culture improves, and people have more confidence in their managers. They talk to them freely, and of course, then corrective action is taken in time. As far as behavior, again, you have slips and lapses. That this person was responsible for the violation. You have to learn to differentiate between what a slip and lapse is and what a violation is. Again, violation can be unintended, that I was not aware, I did not understand, or situational, I cannot get the job done unless I follow this. There are certain times when people are forced to do it that I had no other option but to do it. So you have to basically learn to differentiate what really happened. At the end of it, were you reckless, personal optimizing, organization optimizing? So a root cause analysis will determine all these factors or take into effect all these factors before coming to a conclusion about who all and what all was responsible for the outcome. This is a typical photo that we see every year during monsoons. Mumbai has become notorious. Unfortunately, a number of runway excursions have happened. Yes, of course, the pilot should have gone around, but there are again factors like fatigue and psychological factors that we have discussed in other webinars, something called cognitive lockup, that the pilot is unable to switch to a different task of a go round. There were tailwinds, you have slope, you have runway braking action, and now which is very big is the runway surface reporting. From November 2020, ICAO is changing the whole process. They're removing the damp runway. It is only wet. And of course, the process of reporting has to be modified because if there is a sudden downpour, the runway from wet can easily move to contaminated, especially in a place like Bombay where it doesn't rain, it always pours. So while calculating your performance, it's better to keep a margin which takes into account a bigger safety margin rather than the standard 15%. In the US, there were a number of runway excursions involving Boeing 737s during the winters due to runway contamination, and FAA has come out with a safety circular which says that the 15% may not suffice. So they have said this is the minimum 15%. It could be as much as 30 to 40% also, depending on the runway condition. They have a lot of snow there, so you have different levels of runway condition reporting. After an incident accident, this is the Ishikawa fishbone. If you want to implement it this way, you'll have to put down all the factors. If there was an effect of this human factor, you have to refer. Was there any distraction, organizational factors, unsafe work environment? So we have to put down all the factors, then do an analysis of cause and reason. Coming back to the runway excursions, taking for example, this is again one of the regulators' own enforcement manual. So the regulator's enforcement manual says if safety is jeopardized, so no. If it is no, then oral counseling. But if it is yes, you move right to administrative action. But first, you need to do an investigation and cause and effect. But of course, here they move to administrative action. A show cause notice is issued with a copy of investigation. Last year, there were about 40 pilots who were suspended and in India for various reasons of runway excursions, etc. But one common thing was a copy of investigation was not provided to the crew when the show cause notice was issued. So they really didn't know what was happening. And based on what answer they provided, it was summarily rejected. Once you present a show cause, then the regulator is supposed to determine the severity. If it is low, then it does not qualify for suspension. It is only good for a warning and it ends. But if it is high, then suspension is considered to be the harshest means of punishment. That is the last step you take. But of course, last year we saw that straight away people were suspended for a number of reasons and varying degree from 1 month to almost 1 year. This is part of the enforcement manual of the regulator, which very few people are aware of. This is called the Public Trust Doctrine. This says that the powers basically originate with the people and are entrusted, delegated to the government officers only as a means of exercising governance and with the sole objective that such powers shall be exercised in good faith for the benefit of the people. So yes, the manuals have been made perfectly. They have the right words and they are politically correct, legally correct, but it is the implementation, how you implement it. So the point of discussing this is that all the stakeholders should know that this is the intention with which the manuals were made, that the powers originate with the people and have been entrusted, delegated with the government and for the benefit of the people. So things like natural justice, accountability, impartiality, proportionality, so all these are a part of the manual. So if you're aware of it, then you're better informed. Certain keywords. And again, it talks about an honest mistake. So everybody makes mistakes, and honest mistakes should be differentiated from the deliberate ones. The measured response to a less serious contravention of safety rules and procedures, which may involve counseling and training. So that is the second level. And last is if there is willful negligence, then you take a punitive action like suspension. So after the number of incidents last year, I filed a petition with the Honorable Minister of Civil Aviation. There were 300 signatories to it. That if the state policy is to inculcate just culture, then why are these harsh actions taken based on one clause of the aircraft rules? So that particular clause needs to be changed to inculcate the tenets of just culture. So far there has been no action, but still there was a lot of support. So the idea is to discuss so that people understand, even the regulators and bureaucrats, they understand this is the way people have to move together. You cannot enforce anything top down. There has to be trust which has to be built. It is a collective effort. All the stakeholders have to come together and trust has to be built. It is not that I will hide facts. The moment you start hiding facts, that trust, the bond breaks and everybody starts suspecting. And of course, the workload increases. The workload of the regulator increases. They have to do more audits and you find more issues. So why not come up with a problem that this is a problem we are facing? Let's work out together. So that is a collective effort. The solution lies in establishing the safety. So that is encompassing everything. Reporting culture, informed culture, flexibility. The root cause analysis. So it is not one cause, which was the terminology a few years back. It is root causes. So there are multiple reasons. So the type of root cause analysis you choose can depend on the regulator or the organization. You can use the Ishikawa or you can use the 5 whys or any other method, but there has to be a means to get down to the multiple causes and not fix a blame on one person or organization just to close the case. Just culture and the tenets. So you have to differentiate between an honest mistake and what is a deliberate mistake and take action accordingly. Build trust so that there can be exchange of information. You have to aim for the generative safety culture wherein everybody feels responsible for the safety and the management of safety and safety of others. It is not that the safety department is responsible for safety, everybody is responsible for safety. The collective wisdom and efforts are the key factors which will help. And from the top, if we look, safety culture is involving everybody from top to bottom. So that encompasses everything in the safety management system, which is mandated by IQ also in the Annex 19. So everybody has to come together and it's a collective effort which will lead to a safety and a safer environment. Thank you very much for your attention. I have the blog on the left, mindFly, Twitter, all the videos are uploaded on the YouTube, Facebook, and the email ID. You're most welcome to contact me. We can take this discussion further. The idea is to discuss. It is not that I know it all. You all have a greater number of years of experience, or you could have seen or experienced a different situation. So a combination of situations is also very important, which can come up with a different or the latent threat can become active. It is very important to discuss. We can have a Q&A session now, and whoever wants to come in is most welcome. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Captain Amit. You can all type your questions. In the meantime, I would like to ask you one question that while we talk about root cause analysis, and we know that it should be a standard practice, but as of now, it's at the discretion of the airlines whether to carry it out or not. Do you think it can be made mandatory by the regulatory authority?
Safety culture, the regulator is responsible for the safety culture, and the organization has a culture, organization culture, and the safety culture. So that has to intermingle. So there has to be a common thread between everything. So mandating is one part, which ultimately that is the end of or the last stage of a safety management system, wherein the system is so evolved that people do things themselves and it is self-sustaining. But at the initial stage, the regulator has to provide guidance and in the form of regulatory material and rules and regulations. So it has to be initiated from the regulator side. And of course, everybody has to come in together. They can have organizations can have better ideas how to implement it in their organization, which can be slightly different. So it is a prime requirement, root cause analysis, because you need to know what actually goes wrong, or rather, there's another aspect is what works for you. If something is working for you, you need to stick to it rather than moving to what doesn't work for you.
Right. And what about just culture that we hear about so much in theory, but is not really practiced?
Just cultures, I feel is few years back, it was in vogue quite a bit. Everybody was talking about it. But after the sudden boom in aviation, people got so busy, and also the number of aviation incidents, accidents increased. There was a spike last 2 years that even the regulator, I think, decided to put it, put it aside and take a stern view to bring an end. So cracking the whip basically, as I said, cracks the human.
Yeah.
So you have to stitch it or build things rather than cracking. So you have to build trust. So if you build trust, automatically just culture sets in, and you know how to differentiate. People know that what is acceptable and what is not. That is how things work in the long run. So short run, maybe yes, just culture may work, not in the long run.
Right. And in terms of the responsibility of the auditors, what are your views?
Like I said, in the fishbone, that auditor also plays a very important part. So it is not that the auditor, you have to be scared of the auditor, but the auditor needs to know that he is a part of the system.
Yeah.
Normally, the regulator or the auditor feels that they are here to check people, but they are here to build the system, help build the system. And they should also feel responsible if the system succeeds and even if the system fails. So they also have a learning in that. We have seen it in the number of the financial scams, especially that the regulator failed. Despite the yearly audits, there were still the big scams. We have seen it in aviation accidents that uh, we have yearly audits, but despite that, after an accident, we enforce a statewide special audit. So that happens uh, after a major event. So what is the learning from it? That is not disseminated. So the whole purpose is lost in that process. So the auditor basically has the collection of everything because they have a bird's eye view of what's happening and which way is the industry moving. An organization only has a view of their organization and their people, but the regulator knows different fleets are do the different fleets have a common issue. So is there something wrong in one particular regulation that they have made? So their regulation also could have an issue of implementation or the training procedures. So everybody needs to be open to discussions and take criticism to build a system.
Right. I think the only questions coming in today are from me. So in the meantime, people are still thinking. Uh, we have Captain Majid around. I think we can ask him to share his views on as the industry expert on root cause analysis. I will just unmute him. Captain Majid, you've been unmuted. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Yes, sir.
Thank you, Captain Amit, Sargam. Sorry, once again, I have problem with this new WebEx. Is it called WebEx? I couldn't put any questions in. Anyway, I just have one argument or one discussion with Captain Amit regarding the just culture. I think it's one of the most misunderstood vocabulary in aviation, modern aviation. My question for him is, what can we practically do from the airline management and leadership to ensure not just that we apply it, but so people understand what is a just culture? What practical measures you think we can apply?
Well, just culture is a term, but we need to understand how people behave. So it is not aviation which brings about term, but if we look at society, how do people behave? Because there are regulations in the society, we have laws. So people should have basically a trust in the government. So the employees should have trust in the management. The management, in return, should trust their people or the crew. So the regulations or the procedures which are built should be such that people should have trust in the management and the regulations, that they will not change depending on who is there at the seat or to suit a particular person, and they will apply to everybody equally. So once you have that trust, then people start opening up slowly. So ultimately, it boils down to trust. You have a trust in the system, you have a trust in the people. You know this is a long-term issue. Not that you have one rule for 6 months, then somebody else comes in, the rule changes. So if rule changes too often, then people lose trust and they go into a shell. They stop reporting, they talk within themselves and do not report things to the management or the regulator. So that is the basic tenet, that people should have trust. So just culture is basically that when you have trust that yes, I didn't do anything wrong, so I will not be unduly punished. Or if I may be even rewarded. But if I do things deliberately, then there has to be a clear line that this is not acceptable and this is likely to be punished. So that the faith people should have. And examples, of course, people must be able to see, or they should be able to demonstrate that the system works like that. So trust is the basic issue. So people can forget about the term just culture, but build trust. How do you build trust? Different companies can have different methods of motivating people. Just culture is only one term which was in vogue, just to bring it to effect something.
The
On mute.
Hello?
Captain Majid, can you repeat it? You went on mute.
Oh, sorry. The one of the reasons, the interesting part, of course, is early days now, but the PK 8303 accident, as soon as the news came up, some of the details came up, the Pilot Association, the Pakistani Pilot Association, issued a very, very crude, to me anyway, very crude statement about the whole situation. This begs to ask the question, how is trust built? So these people don't trust their company, their management. And there's good reasons, by the way, for it. If we come back to India, similar thing happens. If I am a guy who's leading the company in some sort of capacity, say vice president operation, this is my last question. I'm asking you as an expert, How do I know that these people trust the system? Is it by personal contact, survey? What method should I use to implement, to understand, that the pilots trust the company for having a just culture? I mean, there's also other things involved like safety, but I'm just talking about the just culture. When do they do something wrong, not by intent, by human error? How is this going to be treated by the company?
Basically, I can give you two examples. I was a part of a startup company wherein we had crew coming in from different organizations. So it was kind of a mixed culture. Once you have a mixed culture, then you have different ways of flying. A lot of people fly with the FDM parameters. So you know that this exceedance will come up. So we should fly the parameters. In number of exceedances were quite high. So what I did was I sent out a mail to everybody that I'm here in the office. Most welcome to come. You give me the parameters. If they are within the limits, then we will modify the parameters, what work for you, and propose it to the regulator. So people came up and they said, we are flying in this terrain and peculiar environment. This works or this doesn't work. So we modified the parameters. Of course, they were within the operator operational limits, and propose it to the regulator. Once approved, people basically, it is not the parameters. People felt responsible that they have contributed to something, so they are responsible to maintain it. So I said, now you have asked for something, you have been granted, so now you're responsible for maintaining safety. So they felt good, they felt a part of the system, they felt motivated. So they were open to come up for even more discussions. So I saw a drastic change, a drop in the number of exceedances. So if somebody has the trust, he will come up and talk to you freely, which means that the system is working. Of course, surveys and all are there. Then surveys also depends on the type of management, but not every management is forthcoming to uh, criticism or feedback. But then human to human, if you have that trust, if you are sitting in the office or walking somewhere and somebody comes up and talks to you openly, which means yes, that barrier is not there. So that is the indication that you get. So that is what I've seen practically happen. We have Ravinder who wants to come in.
Okay, I'll just unmute.
Hello, Captain Amit.
Ravinder.
Hi. Hello, Sargam.
Hello.
Captain Amit, nice. This kind of a presentation. I think I personally attended. I don't know, for last 11, 12 years or maybe 20 years, I have attended number of a presentation in respect of safety management system, just culture and everything. But I fail to understand one thing, that the kind of training we have given it to people, organizations, or organization giving trainings to their men, showing at 100% result and everything, still why it is so difficult for a organization or for the people who are working in that organization to understand what is a just culture, what is a voluntary reporting. So many audits, so many surveillance, so many oversights are conducted every year n number of times, but still people are really afraid to share the data, whether it respect to airworthiness, whether it respect to operational data and all these things. Because what I feel is the collection of data, the sharing of data, the voluntary reporting, this is one thing which is towards the building up this kind of a safety management system or trust amongst the organization. But right now what is happening is, what I feel is that, one example, we'll take an example of a captain only or a co-pilot. If something goes wrong or something some incident or accident happen, the first thing what they think is how to get rid of these things, because they themselves are not sure what is going to happen. Either the instructions are not clear, either the rules are different for captain or co-pilot, either the punishments are different for captain or co-pilot for a similar kind of a incident, accident, or any kind of a reporting. And second thing what I feel is, even the reporting part, people are happy to share anything in respect of the organization, in respect of the system, in terms of an anonymous complaint. They hesitate to write, or they hesitate to inform the organization or a regulator with their correct name or maybe a false name or something, because I don't know, some kind of uh, a mind, what they is not clear with them is that if I disclose my name, I may be taken it very badly, or my name will be destroyed, or nobody will take me for any kind of a job because they will think that I'm a whistleblower or something. But rather than thinking one thing, that this whistleblower or maybe sharing this kind of a data or information may sometime help them to avoid some kind of a disaster or these things. So my entire story of telling all these things is, I just want to know, after implementing SMS in this aviation industry for such a long time, why we are still failed to implement this just culture? Is it a organization failure, or is it a structural failure? Is it a regulation failure? Something means it's very difficult, because after the presentation, everybody thinks that they understood the presentation. Even I always think, because this is some very, very interesting subject for me also. But still, if you see the kind of accidents, and whether it is scheduled, non-scheduled, or general aviation, still I think there is something lacking behind in respect of a voluntary reporting, or what Captain Bhai just told is trust building up, how to build this stuff. So I just want to know something in case it's unsaid. Thank you.
Thank you. Very pertinent question. It basically encapsulates everything. So safety culture is the way safety is handled in the country. So it is not just the organization, but the overall picture. One indicator is the number of voluntary reports that is generated. Not just the anonymous, but voluntary reports. If you see the trend increasing, which means yes, people are feeling responsible. So we saw the safety culture ladder. The topmost is generative, where everybody feels responsible for safety and other safety. And of course, they report everything and they try to bring about a change. And the bottommost is the pathological, wherein they say that if something has happened, don't report it till it is caught. So you have to move upward the ladder, upward from the bottommost pathological to reactive. So it is safety management system is a good principle, provided it is implemented properly. Number of studies have been done wherein they say that safety management system has failed in a lot of countries because of the implementation part. So principally it was with good intention, but practically how do you implement it is the issue. Now, if people feel threatened, then of course your safety management system will fail, because at the end of it, yes, of course, if people are harassed or they feel threatened, they will stop reporting. The moment you stop reporting, your safety management system or safety culture fails, because one of the tenets reporting is failure now. So the whole wheel cannot move properly. And the important part is the top management. So I was reading one of the studies which says that the safety management system has failed. The reason is the top management is not trained in safety management systems. Because everybody, the final policy is signed by the CEO or the accountable manager, or even if the regulator, the top regulator signs a policy, he should have safety in his mind, that how will it affect the safety of the organization or the safety in the country amongst different regulators. So our regulation is slightly skewed towards the largest operator. If you think now the largest operator being a 320 operator, all SOPs or the regulations will come slightly skewed towards the 320 operator. If it becomes Boeing, it will become Boeing. So it is the regulator's responsibility how it is implemented in the country, because the training of the regulator, if you see the top most CEOs and the regulators, how well they are trained, you have to think for yourself. So safety management system, the first principle is it is top to bottom. It is not bottom to top. So unless the people at the top are trained and they understand the safety culture, then only will it be implemented. Otherwise, it is only for the motions that yes, we have implemented. So different phases of SMS you can pass, but the end of it, you have to demonstrate that the safety culture is there. But if you do not have enough reporting, which means the system has failed, it is there in other principles. Like I said, in your everyday life, that you have regulations. If you don't have trust in the law or the police, then you will not report something. If you see crime being committed, you will not report, because you know that if you report, things can go against you. So similarly in aviation, if you are involved yourself or if you see something going wrong, people report, it can be taken as complaining. But in a culture wherein people feel responsible, people like to take criticism and feedback so that it improves them. So it is your environment, how you change your environment. It is not just if you have a manual and implement it, it is there. So that culture part is not understood. What is the culture? You have a national culture, organizational culture, and a personal culture. All three have to go together. Like the Captain Majid was talking about India and Pakistan. Hoofsted, he's a professor from Netherlands, has given a lot of details about the cultures in various countries, the power distance index, and how people behave. So here, if you go towards Asia and east of Asia, the cultures are very strong. The power distance index increases, and you don't want to speak up against your senior or the head, so that your reporting culture goes down. So again, those things have to be leveled up. So if you take things directly from the West, wherein people are more free to talk to their even if you say parents or boss, they are very more casual about it and more free. But once you travel towards the East, there are a lot of barriers. So how do you mix your personal culture and the organization culture? So that is also somebody needs to address, because you are coming from a home wherein, for example, you don't speak up against your father or your grandfather, but in the cockpit, you have an elderly captain, you're supposed to speak up. So how do you suddenly transform on a particular flight? So that organization needs to understand that you are in a particular culture in the society. So that also affects you. So the regulator has to keep that in mind when they are implementing everything. Like I said, you have ASRS, the reporting system in US. So that is de-identified. But if you have an email ID to email, so people will think 10 times in terms of harassment, and I'll be called. And if I'm reporting against a senior, then of course nothing will happen to him. And in my command, I'll be affected or sometime later. So when people have that apprehension, reporting goes down and the culture, of course, no longer exists. So the person at the top, the regulator and the organization, they are all responsible for setting the culture. So ultimately it comes boils down to them, top people.
We have a view from Lalit. He says it's not a question, just a view that most of the airlines train their auditors with root cause analysis training, whereas he feels that it's more necessary for the operations department to get trained on it, and it is also good for the auditors as well. Any views on that before we take on the next question?
Yes, of course, auditors, that is a part of their job, but like SMS, everybody is responsible for safety management. It is not the part of the safety manager. So everybody has to be responsible, even the person in finance, once they are taking a decision of what equipment to purchase. And nowadays it is about your allowances and salaries in the COVID times. Then it is, they have to think about safety. Uh, it is not that you can cut down salaries at your will, people will get affected. And it is for the HR also, when they recruit people, they have to have safety in the mind. So every person in the organization, the moment they take an action, they should have safety in their mind. So the earlier tagline that safety first no longer exists. It is safety in every process. Safety is ingrained in every process. Safety cannot be prioritized first or last. So it is there everywhere. So root cause analysis, similarly, everyone needs to do. People like everybody, the captain or the crew member in every flight will make mistakes. It is just that there are traps or barriers, but you make a mistake, the checklist catches it. So you must always think that what made me do this mistake? Could anybody else also do a similar mistake? So unless I report something, a person at the top would never have thought of that situation. So again, you report because you did a root cause analysis. So that thinking mind has also is a necessity which has to be there.
Right. Captain KK also has a comment where he says that till the time people will be harassed for their faults or no faults, this kind of hiding will continue. Solution is trust building and not fear building.
Correct. Ultimately, it boils down to trust that you see in every lesson. I agree.
Right. I don't see any more questions, any comments from you, Captain Amit, or do we want to take comments from anyone else?
Anybody wants to speak? Most welcome.
Captain Amit, good evening.
Go ahead. Varun, I can't hear you.
Good evening, Captain Amit. I just wanted to know, yesterday or day before, there was an article in the news that an Indigo almost landed on the wrong runway at Malé. Were you able to read that article?
I kind of saw the report but didn't go through it because last year there was an Air India 320, I think 320 or 321, which landed on closed runway. So
Yes, sir, absolutely. So this looks like a repeat of this. And what happened was, I myself, when I was doing that landing, we had to consciously tell ourselves where to land. And subsequently, I took photos the next time I went in. And I raised a report and everything and said, there must be a caution, and even this visual photo must be, um, what do you call, it must be highlighted and stuff. Nothing happened, but what I'm saying is that although I did this in my airline and among my friends, I uh, spread the word. But what has happened is now Air India did the mistake. Now Indigo has done the mistake. Whereas we should have actually one guy making the mistake, and all of us should have been aware. So what do you think regarding that, sir?
So again, clearly points out that the root cause has not been addressed. So you need to find out in the first place when that the first incident, Air India incident happened, what exactly was the issue. So that investigation was quite cursory when I read it. It did not go to the root cause because normally the psychological and physiological part is not investigated. The human factor is not investigated. Like in the San Francisco incident, wherein the 320 almost landed over 4 aircraft on the taxiway, how did they align instead of a runway on a taxiway where 4 aircraft were there? So when you are focusing your attention too much, there are issues which can happen. Like you have expectation bias. If you're expecting a runway to be placed in a particular map, so you have a map of the runway in your mind. So you try to align what you see in your visual field with the map in your mind. Even though expectation bias kicks in, then confirmation bias. That what you see, even though you're seeing a different picture, the mind says, no, what you're doing is right. So it denies everything. So that human factor part is not analyzed in, I think, 90% of the investigations. So it is more of a technical investigation. What actually went wrong? Were there signages or not? Were there lights or not? So that technical aspect is investigated and enforced. That we'll put up another sign, another barrier. But ultimately, the root cause is the human made the mistake. So nobody takes care of the human. They only build another barrier. So in the human-machine interface, they say that it is pointless building barriers, mechanical barriers every time the human fails. You have to correct the human, invest in the human rather than technical barriers. So again, it will be quite interesting if we see or read the report. But again, the report has to be that exhaustive to have determined all the factors. Even the NTSP report, I've read a few of the Japan reports wherein aircrafts had landed on the wrong runway. So clearly that human factor was not analyzed. For example, if you are landing on a closed runway, what was the visual guidance available to you? Because there would not be a ILS, there will not be a puppy. So yes, visually you can align longitudinally, but from the glide slope point of view, how are you descending? So nobody will ask that question. If you see, I'm pretty sure that investigation will not have that analyzed. Yes, if you see a pavement which is a broader or newer, more discernible, you will obviously align for that, thinking that is the runway. But what was the instrument guidance that you were using to descend? That is also a critical question because your instrument will show you something, or usually you need some guidance. So, in that report, is there anything about that? So that is one of the key features.
There's been nothing about it except that some action has been taken. This is an incident that happened in February, and the crew are in trouble. And then after that, with the COVID thing, I don't think the crew have gotten out of trouble yet because possibly the file is still stuck on the first table.
Yeah. So the first thing they should have asked is that, yes, how did you align with the runway and how were you descending? What was the guidance? So, which means there was something to do with their attention. Uh, they were paying attention or distracted, because once your attention is directed to something, the mind basically cuts off a lot of things in the visual field. So that is an interesting thing to analyze. But again, IQ does require human factors to be analyzed, but that is what is the shortfall that is seen everywhere. So that is why it is what you did was right. Best to discuss amongst people, but a bigger forum. It is not for the regulator. First, it is for the operator immediately to find out what exactly went wrong and raise a flag or amend their procedures. The regulator can investigate and come up with a formal investigation, but that doesn't stop the operator to do something, take actions.
All right, I think, okay, Captain KK wants to speak. Captain KK, you can come on, unmute yourself and come on.
Okay, hi. Can you hear me, ma'am?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, hi. Good evening, Captain.
I'm good, thank you.
Okay, so here I just want to take few seconds regarding the harassment, which my own experience. even after worked in DGCA for more than 3 years almost. It is, what I want to say, it is we the pilots, we the people who can change the culture. We cannot sit and think that culture will be changed automatically. It will not happen. Till the time we become vocal, till the time we don't consider harassment as harassment, we consider this kind of, attitude of whether it's a regulatory authority or our own organization, few people sitting in the flight safety and, you know, uh, try to harass pilots. Till the time we speak up and we consider that, okay, it is not harassment, it is part of my life and I will have to fight it out. So it will not go. So we can really change. I just uh, discuss, it happened with me that one day there was a flight from Ahmedabad to Delhi, and we diverted to Amritsar because there was a lot of weather in Delhi, and Delhi was not able to give us time at what time we are going to land, exact time, because there was some another aircraft which had some kind of problem, and they declared they were handling an emergency aircraft. We are handling an emergency aircraft. That was a ATC's, response to us. So we decided to divert because we were not knowing when are we going to land. There's no point keep on holding in air till the time we reach the situation of minimum fuel or mayday fuel. So we diverted, and it was just a normal, simple diversion. And for my, utter shock, I got a call from DGCA itself, and at the same time from my own airline, that there was a diversion due to fuel emergency, but it was not a fuel emergency. So there was a whole mail, and there were a lot of communication which happened. Now, if a person who has not, maybe a new commander who goes through this kind of situation, will consider this as a harassment. I, being experienced, I responded to them and pointed out at their fault by telling them very clearly, categorically, the car, the para, the wordings which I use, and the reason, including my flight plan and everything. So that kind of work I had to do. However, I think it will, in future, even the ATC officer will not call that kind of diversion as an emergency fuel emergency diversion. Neither DGC will or any other person will take it, to that level. So I think, we should be ready to face any kind of questioning, or we should be vocal. What we do, for that we also should be ready for being vocal. So pilots, we being as pilots, as we handle so many emergencies, so many different situations. So I feel, we can also handle such kind of things and change the culture, and it will surely change. So that's all I want to say. Thank you.
Very much. This is a very uh, important point, handling the fuel issues and diversions, because a lot of people are apprehensive about diverting. What will the company think? And will I be asked questions? But I've worked in other countries where the regulators are very different, and the company also. So their safety culture was different. So first thing is that, have you landed safely? Whatever happened, you have landed safely. The first reaction from the regulator and the operator is that good job done. So that really boosts your spirit, that yes, because they want the passengers, crew, the aircraft safe. Whatever might have happened, we will look at it later. But first reaction is a good job. Everybody's safe. Then what happened? So how can we improve? So what led to this diversion, or whatever incident happened? So that is looked at a later stage, so as to correct the system, not the person himself. The person can be trained and counseled, but was there a systemic error that needs to be found out? So that I've seen particularly in Singapore, and other cultures are also safety culture in other places that is prevalent. So again, it all comes down from the regulators' perspective and the organization. that, of course, diversion is not everybody diverts on their whims and fancies. There are a lot of risks involved. So a lot of organizations do not cater for these risks. For example, if you see the go-round procedure in Delhi is a very long go-round procedure. In Bangalore, it is a very long go-round procedure wherein you go to a waypoint and your alternate could be in the opposite direction. I'll give a particular example. In Riyadh, the go-round procedure itself is about 60 nautical miles, if not less. But your flight plan does not contain fuel for that 60 nautical miles, if you notice. But the flight plan contains fuel till your landing, thereafter the diversion. But legally, it should contain fuel for your go-round procedure. So that 60 miles is not catered for. And the second part is that you have to exit a congested airspace. So you could be radar vectored in the opposite direction or held low. So for example, if you have to go to Lucknow from Delhi, you could be held in the western part for some time till the airspace is clear by the time you're consuming fuel. It happened in Mumbai with Air Canada. So Air Canada wanted to divert. Mumbai said stand by a couple of times. Finally, Air Canada declared emergency, Mayday. Still Bombay didn't respond. So that is the practical part which people need to understand, that there are risks involved in this. And if somebody has landed your aircraft safely, then there's no point harassing him, because next time it could work the other way around, that he's likely to take more risk and continue to hold with a marginal fuel, and thereafter thereby risking the whole system. So if somebody is diverted, no issues. It should be basically applauded. Yes, of course, you need to do again an analysis that if this particular person has been diverting for the same reason, so is there a trend? One-off thing, of course, this goes against the whole safety culture. I completely agree with you. And your knowledge of the system saved you. The other person, inexperienced, could have succumbed. So that basically brings the whole system down.
Right. I think we need to wrap up now, Captain Amit. It's almost an hour and a half now. Any sneak peek into next week's topic?
Next week, we can discuss about cultures in aviation, how the culture affects. Right now, especially in Asia, we have different types of cultures, very strong cultures. So they have effect both organization culture and the national culture. So we can discuss how certain accidents have happened because of that. That we can discuss next Saturday.
Okay. So next Saturday, same at. So I will just sum up and say that effective management is not just about putting out fires for the problems, but also finding ways to prevent them. So problem solving is one of the most important and the most absent skill in today's workplace, modern workplace. So root cause analysis helps in this. It encourages evidence-based thinking, logical thinking, and reduces the blame culture, which is what we need to embrace, because that is what would eventually lead to a culture of success. So thank you everyone for joining us, and we hope to see you next Saturday at 5 p.m. Thank you, Captain Amit. We'll see you soon.
Thank you, everybody.